Hey everybody. So it's been about, how long has it been? About 3.5 years since my last video, which was on True Detective. I really like making the videos, but I found that I didn't have the time to commit to making them with my career and everything. So I've decided that I'm going to still make some videos from time to time. They're going to be kind of more organic, stream of consciousness, just sort of me watching a movie and talking about it, giving you my opinions and impressions on movies. And of course, anything that jumps out to me and that's related to psychology, I'll be sure to point that out as well. So the first movie that I wanted to talk about is a movie called Smile that came across my radar. It was on some internet forums. Horror is actually one of my favorite genres. There's quite a bit in here about psychology. So the first thing I want to point out, and this is really just kind of a tangent, but I don't know if it's just me or Rotten Tomatoes or what, like the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but something has definitely changed over time. When I used to go to Rotten Tomatoes years ago, I would check out most movies that I would watch there just to get the kind of general critical consensus. And I wouldn't always agree with it, but I would say like 9 times out of 10, I would not necessarily agree 100% with what they said, but if they found a movie to be fresh, 9 times out of 10, even if I didn't especially like the movie, I could like at least respect it or understand why it got that high rating. But I don't know what's happened, but that seems to have changed quite a bit, because now oftentimes I'm on here and I see movies that are rated really high and I'm kind of baffled as to why they have such a high rating, or movies that I really thought were great. There was a lot of honest, hard work put into them. Maybe they were somewhat original or just well executed, and they don't get a very high rating. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I just wanted to mention it. And let me just scroll down and read the basic movie info. It says, after witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Cotter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins taking over her life, Rose must confront her troubling past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality. Typically, I would probably talk about a movie, break some stuff down, and maybe give my conclusion at the end or whether or not I would recommend it. In this case, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, I really didn't like this movie, and I didn't make it very far into it. Typically, my rule is like I have to give a movie at least 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. If within 30 minutes a movie can't do anything to prove to me that it's got something interesting to say, or that there's some good acting or case study or something there that I find valuable, then I usually just move on. I think that that's a pretty good, I really think that within 30 minutes something should be able to prove that it's got some value to you. And unfortunately, this movie wasn't able to do that for me. The movie starts, and the psychiatrist is waking up. She fell asleep on her desk where she had kind of like a nightmare. It seems to be a flashback, maybe something from her childhood. She witnessed her mother overdose or something like that, walked in on her when she was dead as a little girl. I guess it kind of gives you a hint that, that this person's past is going to be a big aspect of what's happening in the story. And I guess that is what's mentioned in the description of the movie that I read at the beginning. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily unheard of that you would have a therapist who has some repressed trauma that they haven't dealt with. The thing is, as a therapist, dealing with trauma every day, working around these issues, you're going to have had ample opportunity to address your traumas and to try to get some freedom from those traumas, and to try to get your symptoms down. So it seems, I don't know, like maybe just right off the bat, I'm losing a little bit of respect or interest in the protagonist, who appears to be, in the description it's mentioned doctor, so I'm assuming that we're talking about a psychologist, maybe a psychiatrist. Either way, you're talking about an expert in psychology who, for whatever reason, hasn't engaged in proper self-care to try to overcome her own issues. And so that to me just seems a little bit like you're dealing with a kind of reckless therapist, which isn't necessarily unbelievable, just something that I noticed kind of right off the bat. Maybe a therapist who isn't putting in that time for self-care that they should. And yes, my copy of this movie is hard-coded with subtitles, so I'm sorry about that. This is, I don't know. I mean, there are different therapists who have different styles. Typically, so she's meeting with a client. He's kind of perseverating over this statement. He thinks he's going to die. He says he's dying. He seems upset. So in his mind, that's pretty real. That's a fixed, belief or delusion of his that he has. And right off the bat, she's challenging him. He says, she asks what's going on. He says, I'm going to die. She says, no, you're not. I don't know. That's just, that's not realistic for how a therapist would typically respond in this situation. It's typically our job to ask questions, to try to guide the client, to try to understand their perspective. Typically, flat out confrontation or challenging a belief or a delusion is not something that's done in most forms of therapy. Yes, there are some that do that. I would say that in most cases, this presentation is not the one that you're going to find. Now, she does have a rapport with this client. She obviously knows the client, knows the history. Maybe this is just her therapeutic strategy to kind of come in and challenge him each time in this way directly. But typically that's not done because it's been found to be, frankly, not very helpful, because to him that might be very real. And by you telling him that it's not real, you are invalidating what is real to him. And that can be very upsetting, very troubling.
Don't you tell me. You don't know.
Here, she's applying a medical term, kind of a framework for what's happening to him. That's obviously a more medical model, prescriptive way to approach this client. And, again, that can be helpful in some contexts. But as you saw, the way that he's reacting, he says, don't tell me, you don't understand. And that's honestly the more realistic response that you would see out of clients in most of these situations, because it's not helpful.
Promise.
That's something else that's weird. As a therapist, you don't make promises about anything because you don't know the future. You don't know what he's experiencing. You don't know if it could cause him pain, could hurt him in some way that you don't understand. To make him a promise that it's not going to hurt him, again, this is very stupid. It's much more prescriptive than therapy tends to be in the real world. We tend to just try to understand and to try to move through, maybe work with him on some skills and some things like that, maybe redirect him. But you don't tell him that she did multiple things here that are not very helpful in most contexts. One is to tell him that what he's experiencing isn't real. Maybe apply some kind of prescriptive medical jargon to it, which totally invalidates the reality of what he is actually experiencing, because that is real to him. And then you make him a promise that it can't hurt him, and that it's not a big deal, basically. So she's being dismissive of what he's believing. She's not really listening to him very well. She's immediately prescribing him something. And she is underplaying his symptoms, and then making him promises. And in therapy, I've learned a lot of things. You don't make promises in therapy. You don't know what the outcome of things are going to be. People are messy. Situations unfold organically. So I just don't find that to be very realistic. Okay, and so now she has placed this client under observation. She says he's harmless, but she wants him to be checked on. So that's weird. If a doctor or if a therapist places somebody under observation, they need good reason, good evidence for doing so. She just kind of does it. It doesn't really share with us what her reasoning is. Doesn't share with the staff what her reasoning is. Again, it's just a little weird. I think there would be some reason. It would be nice if that was shared with the audience as to what that is. But, the staff just kind of blindly do it without really any question. You can tell by the way that the building was set up and by what's happening here that she obviously works in some kind of a mental health emergency hospital, maybe where they do civil commitments, could be some kind of a forensic unit. But in any event, this is clearly a medical facility that has a mental health wing or component to it. And that tells me a lot because I have quite a bit of background working in those types of facilities. This is one scene that I'm glad that they put in, because this is a huge problem in the field, is money and payment. Oftentimes, folks will come in, or that you'll see people or have some interaction with them, but there won't be the insurance or funding necessary to get them the treatment that they need. That's certainly very real. That's definitely a problem in the field. So I'm glad that was mentioned here.
Maybe the board should try giving a shit about the point of our job here.
I don't know, that that's not a statement that you're going to hear from a psychiatrist who has any, experience in the field, because you get so inundated with this system every day that you totally understand what it is. And for her to make a statement like that, like, why doesn't the board give a shit or whatever, like that's really more the writer speaking, or maybe like the voice of somebody who's upset with the system because they've tried to get care for themselves or a loved one and haven't been able to get it. A seasoned psychiatrist who's been in this field knows the game, knows that that's just how these things work, and that nobody can get paid. You can't make payroll to your staff if you're not able to bill insurance. And so that's going to be very clear to her. She's going to know that. She's not going to be like baffled as to why they can't treat this person or why the board doesn't care. It's not that the board doesn't care. It's that the board does care about being able to keep the doors open, being able to keep serving clients. And you can't do that if you can't get payment from the insurance company, because you can't pay your staff, can't pay for the facility, can't pay for any of the treatment that the clients need.
You haven't been here since the late shift last night, have you?
He just questioned, like, you haven't been here since the late shift last night. When we first were introduced to her, she was waking up from sleeping on her desk. So I guess you're led to believe that she stayed there all night. She just slept on her desk and then woke up and immediately went back to work. So again, that's not very healthy. She had a nightmare. She's clearly got some issues in her own life that she needs to address.
We're called on her for public disturbance. EMS brought her in.
She's got any psych history?
Nothing on file, but the police sent over a report for a different incident she was involved in last week. A professor at her school bludgeoned himself to death with a hammer.
A hammer?
Okay, so yes, this is definitely a forensic unit, and oftentimes police will bring people in who they think are dangerous due to mental health concerns. They will bring them in here to be evaluated and hopefully treated by the mental health staff. But I just found her response there to be pretty funny. A hammer? Like, if you've worked at any of these facilities, you are used to dealing with stabbings, all sorts of weapons, hammers, guns, all sorts of, weapons of any kind. So nothing is going to be shocking to you. The way that she said that, it's like she was shocked. But if you work in one of these facilities day in and day out, you will have encountered that and many things that are even way more bizarre than that. Okay, so I want to mention this because this is very odd. All right, I'm not saying that this isn't possible, but I'm saying that the way that this room is set up is a problem. The wall directly in front of her is where the client is kind of standing in the corner, and then the wall to the right is where the door is. The only door in or out of the room is right there. And whenever they sit kind of in the center of the room, the door is kind of far away and the phone is kind of far away. So you can't escape and you can't call for help very effectively. Now, I'm not saying that this is 100% implausible, but I'm saying that most facilities nowadays, and certainly the ones that I have worked in, are going to have a lot better safety protocols than what you're seeing here. You don't want a client, especially working in one of these inpatient units. These are set up for dangerous situations typically. So like I said, police find somebody who is maybe talking nonsense, but they're doing something dangerous in public. So they assume there's some mental health or drug, aspect of what's going on. So then they bring them in to be evaluated and treated. So if you work in one of these facilities, you are used to working with dangerousness. There are lots of people who come in who are doing things that are dangerous to themselves or to somebody else. And so to treat them, you have to have proper safety protocols. For one, you would never want the client to have any opportunity to get between you and the door, to trap you in a room. You're looking at a case there where the staff could be wounded or killed. That's certainly happened many times in the past, actually. So they're just kind of asking for a staff to be killed by kind of setting up the room like this. And then having the panic phone way on the other side of the room where she can't even necessarily get to it if she has an emergency. Also, that's just asking for trouble. A lot of the newer facilities, you'll just kind of have something on you like a pin that you can push or something like that to kind of get help. The other thing is there would be more visibility, like that wall to the psychiatrist right where the door is. There would typically be like windows there, so that you can be observed safely by other staff to make sure that you're okay, and so that they can get in to help you if something does start to happen. So the way that this is set up is not very realistic. It might be realistic for some older hospitals, older models, but it certainly wouldn't pass modern protocols for safety. The other thing is here, she's meeting with a client who's already upset and standing in a corner, and she's the only person in the room with this client. Again, I worked crisis for years, and I'm telling you right now that meeting with this client alone without any supervision, without anybody there to assist you, is not the best course of action. You should at least be observed so that somebody can get in to help you, because you have a client who is upset, who's agitated, who's up against the wall. You don't know if they could be a threat or not. You don't know what's going on. You know that there was some violence, according to the police report, with the last incident that they came in involving the death of a professor. You should definitely err on the side of caution. And what's happening here, if this is a realistic depiction of what's happening at some facility, I would say this is a pretty stupid setup.
I just want to have a chat. I promise this is a safe place.
And again, right there, the therapist is making promises. She's like one of the worst therapists. Like she meets with clients and tries to put them at ease by lying to them. Like you should never promise things that you can't guarantee. And you can't guarantee that to this client. So there's a good shot over there on the corner. You can see the phone. Like I said, that's just such a bad room design. Very unsafe.
Okay, what day of the week is it?
All right, so what's happening right here is called a mental status exam. This is actually realistic and tends to be one of the first things that you do open with in one of these kind of emergency evaluations. You're trying to see if somebody, you're trying to see how oriented somebody is. If you've ever read medical files on somebody, you might see the statement oriented times 4. What that means is oriented to person, place, time, and situation. And there are different variations on this exam, but typically you would start out to see if the person can tell you their name. Can they tell you what time it is? Can they tell you where they are? And can they tell you why they are there? And then that way you can kind of get a basic semblance of, are they able to answer basic questions? What's their kind of framework of reality? Things like that.
And the month?
She asked time twice. She asked what day and what month is it. So she asked what day it was, she answered it. She asked what month it was, she answered that. So far, she's only oriented times 1 because she did the time twice, which is a little unusual. Typically, you would just move on. You move from one to the next.
Sometimes when we get emotionally overwhelmed or experience an intense trauma, our minds...
You're not listening to me! I'm gonna fucking die and no one will listen to me!
Okay.
That's what happens whenever you too quickly try to So this, this therapist, you're kind of seeing this same pattern. Like, this is just the way that she meets with clients. In my opinion, she's not a very good therapist. She's way too quick to start throwing around, prescriptive language to try to medically rationalize what's happening to somebody. She needs to take more time to really try to understand and feel what they're feeling, and try to get a better picture and a better sense of what this person is going through, and try to get a fuller picture of the kind of scope of the symptoms, and maybe some more background on it. Spend some more time making yourself an ally, which in most cases, it's actually not very difficult to become a client's ally, even somebody who's upset like this. You just typically actively listen, and then you reflect back to them kind of what they're saying to make sure that you understand. Clients very rarely are going to be upset with you for trying to understand them. And so that's the starting point. She's way too directional. She's very clearly got this agenda when she's meeting with this client. She's trying to kind of quickly get to a diagnosis and then move on. And so to me, that would be bad therapy. Now, again, this is just my opinion of what I'm seeing. I see a very bad therapist who has demonstrated multiple issues across more than one client. This goes back to what I was saying earlier with the problem of having the phone on the other side of the room. You've got this emergency happening. You have a client going into a complete episode here, and you need help. So what does she have to do? She has to run way over to this wall and call for help. Like, this would be solved, again, if there was kind of observation happening from the outside, if she had a panic button on her. Numerous other ways to solve this. This is just a very poor setup of this room. She's kind of got her back to the client. Like, she's going to turn around, the client's behind her. Like, that's obviously what's going to happen here. But again, that's very poor setup. Not only do you not want to turn your back to a client like this in one of these evaluation and treatment settings, but you don't want the client to be between you and the door. Safety issue. I know that they're just trying to make a movie here, but doctor's just kind of standing by while this client harms themselves with something that they got in the room. So again, like, where's the staff? Where's the assistants coming in to help stop this situation? You're just stuck in a room with a client who has a weapon. They're harming themselves. And it appears that she got that weapon from inside the room. So again, these are very poorly set up rooms that are not very realistic. You wouldn't have a weapon like that in a room. We're only 13 minutes in. I'm already pretty annoyed by the way that this unit is being portrayed, the behaviors of the psychiatrist, and just the kind of overall lack of realism in what I'm seeing. I should also mention, I've seen horror movies. I love horror movies. I have no problem with, suspension of disbelief. I totally understand schlock and things like that. But I guess there has to be something else happening that's interesting, or that kind of makes up for these inconsistencies. Like, there has to be something that builds enough goodwill or good faith to keep me watching, keep me interested in other aspects of what's happening. I just, for me, I haven't seen anything here that's really interesting to me yet. You've got this overworked therapist who has some trauma from her past that she hasn't resolved, and now she's just witnessed another traumatic incident. I think, like, you've got a lot of evidence here. This client really, or this therapist needs to be on leave. After being exposed to a trauma like that, she needs to get quite a bit of therapy herself, and she needs to be on leave. So she shouldn't be working anymore after this, at least for like a week or two, for her to get, kind of recouped.
Would you say she was typical of the patients you see here?
This is an emergency psychiatric unit.
So again, this is an emergency psychiatric unit, and so why they're not following basic safety protocols becomes even more off-putting now that they have made that very clear as far as what kind of a facility this is.
Thing here.
Right. But she was a head case, yeah?
I don't know. This whole interview is very annoying, especially the cop on the left. He doesn't say much at all, but what he does say is just very demeaning to people with mental illnesses. Now, again, you can have negative experiences with law enforcement. I've worked with a lot of law enforcement at a lot of these types of facilities. Typically, what I've noticed, and I've worked in 3 different states, multiple different counties at these different places, and typically police are pretty respectful of what you do, and they value you, and they are one of your community partners. And I worked closely with law enforcement many times. And I'm not saying that it's not impossible. You're not going to come across a cop who's having a bad day or just kind of an asshole. But to have one just kind of make a statement like that, I don't find it to be very realistic, especially during like a professional interview like this. This is just, I don't see cops who are busy trying to investigate a case making a disrespectful statement like that. Doesn't make any sense.
She could have been suffering from acute post-trauma psychosis. She was having paranoid delusions. Sort of evil presence was haunting her.
Yikes. Yeah, she sounds fucking crazy to me.
And see, this is where this movie, to me, it's like, I don't know if it's trying to be a comedy. Like is this some like unintentional comedy moment here or what? Because when he makes a statement like that, I just want to start laughing because that is hilarious and so ridiculous, and not how a professional interaction with your community stakeholders during a professional interview like this is going to go down. He's not going to repeatedly demean your population and what you do. Say that some yeah, it sounds fucking crazy to me. I mean, maybe that's how some people might talk, like when they're alone with their partner or like as like an aside or whatever. But they are doing a professional interview with the psychiatrist, last person who saw this client alive, and they're trying to gather information. It just doesn't seem very realistic to me. All right, and there's another scene that happens here pretty shortly after this. She's having like a lunch with some people, and one of the people that they're having lunch with, again, makes a demeaning comment about the patients, and she gets really defensive and upset about it. I don't know, like this just doesn't feel very realistic, kind of day in the life of a therapist. I know that's what it's trying to do, but what it comes across to me more is like some screenwriter's idea of what it might be like to be a therapist, having done almost no real research or look into what it's actually like to be a therapist. Not like you just walk around and in every conversation you have, people are making fun of your profession and putting down what you do and your clients. I have found the opposite to be true. People are generally pretty respectful of what you do, and they find it to be very interesting, and they understand that it's a pretty good service to society. You know, again, everybody's experience is different. That's just been mine, and this is not congruent with any experience that I've had in the field over 10 years. She comes across as a very amateur therapist, or maybe somebody who hasn't really had much training at all, which is bizarre because she's supposed to be a doctor. So with her level of education, I would expect more professionalism and more kind of nuance and just more of a general seasoned therapist presentation, not making so many of these basic mistakes that I've pointed out earlier. All right, that's my basic thoughts on this movie. I mean, I'm not that far into it, but I don't know, maybe some better things happen later on, but those are just my first impressions right off the bat. There's a lot of things here that were just annoying to me and didn't really give me much reason to keep watching. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.